You know, it's not every day you gotta bundle up when you head to work in Southwest Florida, but today is just one of those days. I'll show you where temperatures are right now and where they're headed this afternoon as soon as I get in the studio. Temperatures this morning are just a little bit warmer than where they were this time yesterday, but hang tight because another blast of cold air is on the way. I'll explain how cold it's going to get when it arrives in just a few moments. Thank you, Brenna. Now coming up on 4:42 on Friday afternoon, and boy, it's been a long week, hasn't it? Talking an awful lot about the past several days when it comes to Hurricane Dorian. It's still a long ways away from us, unfortunately, and as it continues to slow its forward speed, it's going to be a long couple of days as we continue to monitor the changes of this hurricane. Look at these beautiful pieces of artwork. I had the privilege this morning of spending the morning at the Mason Classical Academy in the city of Naples, and the kindergartners made me these beautiful little pictures. And they also spelled my name right. It was really cute.
I think this is Rob dropping raindrops.
That's Rob with a good tan, too. I like that look. I like that look a lot. And I'll tell you what, today's good tanning weather because it's beautiful outside, not a cloud in the sky. My appropriate Christmas tree shaking his stuff there for you. You're going to have some good weather tonight as clouds hang tight. Temperatures will drop back into the upper 60s and low 70s while you're walking around downtown Fort Myers tonight. And I don't think you have to worry much about rain. If we do see a few raindrops, they would stay super, super isolated. So just go downtown and have some fun and enjoy the great music. Principally over the downtown core here and then across into North Fort Myers where we have seen the most significant rotation. Now remember, context is important here. There is not a severe amount of rotation going on, but based on Doppler radar returns, there has been enough for the National Weather Service to issue this severe thunderstorm warning. You see here on the side of your screen how traffic is slowing down. Again, based on GPS positioning, that storm tracker right now is sitting in traffic right here along MLK. You notice that the cars aren't moving very fast. You don't see a whole lot of wind, but you do see a lot of very heavy rain falling here. Yeah, listen, I've been spending a lot of time in the past several days on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. I always do, but when the weather's bad, I spend a little bit more time on here answering viewer questions, and I've been getting a lot of questions revolving around storm shutters. Donna asks, she says she lives in Northport, Charlotte. Should she put shutters up? And Donna, my advice to you is no, not yet. We're not at that point where hurricane shutters are a necessity. The reason I say that is because the official recommendation is that hurricane shutters should go up in your area if you're under a hurricane watch. That gives you at least 2 full days notice because a hurricane watch is issued 48 hours before the onset of hurricane force winds. And if you wanted to experience a hurricane, hopefully we're never going to have to, but if you ever wanted to, right here you can go inside the brand new iMag Hurricane Simulator and experience what it's like to feel those hurricane force winds. Lots of cool stuff coming up your direction later on today, whether you just want to play at the wall or you want to talk more science about Hurricane Dorian. Now on your car, obviously you can't take it 5 feet above the ground. Instead, most cars are going to have their thermometer somewhere inside the grille, so notice that's only about 2 feet above the ground. Cold air is more dense than warm air, so cold air is going to sink, which is why the car thermometer might end up being a lot colder than what the actual air temperature would be that you would see on TV or on the NBC2 News app, because it's simply being recorded from a height that's about 3 feet higher than where the actual thermometer is inside your car.
Tell you what, if somebody put those in my kid's box during Halloween, they would throw them out. This includes the chocolate dipped and non-chocolate varieties if you're curious, but coconut patties is the official candy of the state of Florida.
Well, don't bring your daughters to my house then, because I love those things. I've been passing those out left and right. I love the taste of coconut. You're not a big fan of it then?
I thought mojitos were our state candy.
Well, times are changing up here, all right? All right, let's switch over to the weather then. Boy, we had some persistent late blooming showers over parts of Fort Myers and Cape Coral tonight, but all that is left is only a few isolated drops of rain over beautiful Sanibel Island. Now, it's not moving very fast, but it has been showing signs of moving toward the north, so communities like Captiva and St. James City on Pine Island could see a few drops of rain here closer toward midnight. In terms of rain accumulation, by far it was Cape Coral and Fort Myers, right along McGregor Boulevard, that were the winners today, with nearly 1.5 inches of falling later on this evening after dinner time tonight. There is estimated by Doppler radar returns. So what is going on with the weather? Well, I'm sure you've known, if you've been paying attention at all to the news over the past week, that right now as we speak there is a very broad, disorganized tropical wave sitting right over top of the state of Florida. But in addition to that, a few thousand feet up into the air, there's also a broad upper level disturbance that's anchored right here, very close to New Orleans, Louisiana. The combination of this this upper level low and the tropical wave closer toward the surface has everything to do with your weekend forecast, because you notice how these wind arrows are coming at us from the west and the southwest. That is the reason why our weather will be a little topsy-turvy tomorrow, as your best opportunities for downpours and thunderstorms actually comes during the first half of the day, a little backwards as to what you might consider typical for this point in the year. So notice here Saturday morning right around sunrise, don't be at all surprised if we're tracking some downpours and thunderstorms in areas along and to the west of Interstate 75. You see, what tends to happen is, since the wind is coming at us from the south and the southwest, the showers that like to pop up over top of the Gulf in the morning, they just get pushed on shore. So all the way through lunchtime tomorrow, most especially if you live to the west of I-75, it's fair game for some downpours and thunderstorms. In the afternoon, though, still because the wind is out of the south and the southwest, the widest coverage of rain more often than not trends to transition over toward the east coast. So around dinner time tomorrow night, it's areas like Fort Lauderdale and Miami that will have the better rain coverage, and our rain here on this side of the state will go more isolated. Now, unfortunately, it looks like we're going to hold on to a bit in the way of cloud cover through Saturday evening. So yes, not the best forecast to be outdoors, but if you want to be outdoors and not have to worry as much about rain, you're better off in making those outdoor plans after 3-4 o'clock during the daytime hours. And if you want to be indoors for the whole day and you like craft beer brewed here in Southwest Florida, consider joining the brewery tour on August 3rd. It starts tomorrow at the Momentum Brew House, and then they stop at all these local craft breweries here in the area. Again, you're going to be indoors, so what's the difference about the weather? But if you're curious here, there'll be a few showers here for the first half of the brewery tour as the temperatures hold there back toward the low and mid 80s. All right, switching gears and moving our attention back to the tropics. There's two tropical waves in addition to the one that's right over top of us that are active over the Atlantic basin. What you should know about them is wind shear is very strong right now, and that's really helping to keep both of them in check. And even though there's two out there, really only one has showing any signs of possible development in the next 5-6 days. Wind shear right now is very evident. Everywhere you see these shades of yellow and red shows you very strong mid and upper level winds. So that will really keep this one near Puerto Rico in check. But you see how there's a small window here just to the west and the northwest of this tropical wave? If something is able to come about from it this weekend, it would happen in this part of the Atlantic Ocean to the east of the Lesser Antilles. But regardless whether that forms into a tropical depression or not, it is still way too early to determine if it has any impact whatsoever on the weather here in the United States. All right, so just for the weekend forecast, focus on morning showers, afternoon showers, and then mainly cloudy conditions for the majority of the day there as we get toward the second half of the weekend. Back to you. Thank you, Brenna. Now coming up on 4:42 on Friday afternoon, and boy, it's been a long week, hasn't it? Talking an awful lot about the past several days when it comes to Hurricane Dorian. It's still a long ways away from us, unfortunately, and as it continues to slow its forward speed, it's going to be a long couple of days as we continue to monitor the changes of this hurricane and hope for the best, but of course have to prepare for the worst. I mentioned before that the location right now is about 742.9 miles, if you will, to the east and the southeast of the city of Cape Coral. This has been unchanged here, but it's 4:42. Inside the next 25 minutes, we'll be expecting a brand new 5 p.m. advisory update from the National Hurricane Center. So we shall see if it's been able to strengthen or weaken or hold its intensity in the past 3 hours here when that new advisory comes out here in just a few minutes. One of the best tools we've had to use today is the high-resolution satellite. This is a visible satellite image, so we can only see it during the daytime because it requires sunlight in order to see. And of course, you saw with the lapse of the image how things were, obviously quite impressive in the morning, but now becoming even more impressive because of that right there. See that more well-defined eye structure? The more defined the eye is in a hurricane, the stronger it is. If you recall back to what those satellite images looked like of Hurricane Irma, it was just like a giant bagel, if you will. It's a very, very well-formed hurricane. This one obviously pales in comparison to the intensity just yet of Hurricane Irma, but it is certainly trying here based on how the satellite trends have evolved of becoming stronger. Now remember, the environment it's moving toward, the reason it's been able to strengthen so far is ripe for development. There's lots of warm, open water in the ocean. There's relatively weak mid and upper level winds, which means low wind shear, and there's plenty of atmospheric moisture as well. So Dorian has what it needs to hold its strength and it gets stronger here in the coming days as it continues its movement more toward the west and the northwest. With this in mind, again, I mentioned a new hurricane forecast cone is due out inside the next few minutes. So take a mental picture, if you will, and we'll see how it's different in the next few minutes. But the most recent thinking is that we have the Category 4 hurricane, the center of it, anywhere inside this red shaded in area by Monday morning. So remember, it's still possible that it could take the northern route and go more toward North Florida. It's also still possible it could take that southern route and head more towards South Florida. Still a few question marks, of course, based on forecast disagreement. The big trend, though, that's been developing in the past 24 hours is a slower forward speed as we get toward early next week, which means Dorian is not going to be a hit and run type event, give us a lot of bad weather and then take off. As it slows down, that means the impacts will be a bit longer lasting in terms of some rain and some breezy, windy conditions up and down the state here. By Wednesday, the Hurricane Center only has it just to the north of Orlando by Wednesday morning. So a long-lived event, unfortunately, pretty much anywhere you may happen to call home here in the state of Florida. With this in mind, I've been referencing, of course, the size on the map that Dorian takes up right now. You know, by comparison to how big hurricanes and tropical storms can be, physically, Dorian's not a super big one. The hurricane force winds right now extend out about 25 miles from the center of circulation. So that's where those 115 sustained mile per hour winds are. The tropical storm force winds right now extend about 100 miles from the center of circulation. So you can, be about 100 miles away from where the eye of Hurricane Dorian is and still experience tropical storm force winds. But depending on the track this thing takes, there could be a big range in the impacts that we see just between the two coastlines of South Florida. Now remember, Florida really isn't very wide at all. It doesn't take very long to get to Lauderdale or Palm Beach or Miami. So if you have a Category 4 hurricane sitting off of, say, Palm Beach or Broward County, we're still going to obviously see some direct impacts here on the West Coast. But by far, the worst of any storm surge would be on the East Coast. The worst of those hurricane intensity winds would be on the East Coast. The worst of the rain would be on the East Coast. And the farther east you happen to live is where you would see the greatest amount of impacts. That goes not only for the rain, but rather not only for the wind, but also for the rain. The most intense amount of rain will be pinned on the East Coast. And again, the further east you happen to live is where the more greater impacts would happen to be.
All right, so on Twitter, Rob, you tweeted out something about the hurricane graveyard. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so the hurricane graveyard sounds like a really good movie title, I think, but it also plays a big role in hurricane season. And when we refer to something called the hurricane graveyard, I'm talking specifically some enormous mountains that happen to be in areas of the northern Caribbean Sea and the far southwestern corners of the Atlantic. So on areas like Puerto Rico, there actually are mountaintops that exceed 4,000 feet. And in Dominican Republic, they're even taller, with some mountaintops being above 10,000 feet. And it's a similar situation in Haiti, where there's mountaintops that exceed 8,000 feet in elevation. These mountaintops are so tall that they can help to interrupt the low-level circulation around tropical depressions, tropical storms, and hurricanes. And this tropical wave that is worth watching over the next several days, well, right now it is located just to the east and the southeast of this so-called hurricane graveyard. What the graveyard can do then is it can take strong systems like hurricanes and knock them down in intensity. And it can also take relatively weak systems like our tropical wave here and keep them very disorganized as they move toward the west and the northwest in the general direction of Florida. And that is why this tropical wave, even though it's worth watching over the next 4 or 5 days, is not expected to be able to organize anytime soon, at least in the next 2 days. You'll notice with our tropical futurecast, the moisture in connection with it will bring some heavy downpours and some heavy thunderstorms to parts of Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, and Haiti as we get toward Wednesday. But it's not until here, as we get toward Wednesday afternoon, when the moisture from this system begins to pop out near the Turks and the Caicos and the Bahamas. It's at this point in its future where there could potentially be some strengthening here in terms of its overall system development into perhaps a tropical depression or something like that.
Meteorologist Rob Duns was out at the Sand Sculpting Championship. A great assignment, Rob.
Yeah, we've had just some perfect weather. And I think it's fair to say they've had a very successful opening day here on the sand sculpting competition on Fort Myers Beach. You know, in the matter of only a couple of hours, we've seen big piles of sand that look like nothing just turn into these incredible works of art. This one here, we haven't featured it on TV today. It's like almost a full-size VW bug that is being constructed purely out of sand right before your very eyes here on Fort Myers Beach. It's been just an incredible day. And you know, of course, like you guys mentioned before, that red tide, it isn't issue. There's a lot of it right now in the Gulf of Mexico, but I've been out here all day long. I have not noticed one little whiff of red tide, thanks in part to the fact that there's still been an offshore wind today. So the air has been coming from land and pushing toward the water. So it's kind of pushing all that red tide business out to sea. Tomorrow, the winds are going to turn a little bit more out of the south, so you may notice a little bit more of red tide. But the big question comes in on Sunday when the winds change around thanks to this inbound cold front.
Any favorites out there? Any sculptures to see that you really like?
Yeah. You know that Frozen movie everyone's talking about? Every kid under 10 years old is going to grow exactly to Olaf. It's right there on the it's kind of on the horizon. You may not be able to see it, but tell your kids that they're going to meet Olaf. It's like a real size Olaf is out there on the sand. It's very, very, very cool, very timely, and also just a fun thing you could do with the family. You can't go wrong here at Fort Myers Beach.